With that, I yield back to myself and recognize Senator Lee.
You see the things you start.
I think it might have been Bob Murray. Not Bob Murray, Charles Murray.
I'll look it up while you're doing it, but yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was at Cato, but yeah, they'd rather be, no, it might have been, anyway.
Yeah, we'll think of it. All right, Mr. Mulvaney, let's start with you. Back when you were Congressman Mick Mulvaney, which was awesome, in addition to the many other awesome hats you've worn, back in 2014, almost a decade ago, you had an exchange with then Treasury Secretary Jack Lew. Do you remember this? You had an exchange with him, and you're asking him some questions about why the government was pretending to lack the capacity to prioritize incoming revenue to ensure that the first money in the door went out the door to cover interest on debt. Do you remember this exchange?
I do.
Now, do you recall, and can you provide some thoughts as to why Democratic appointees in both the Obama administration and now the Biden administration, particularly in their Treasury departments, so consistently, so defiantly refuse to state that bondholders will be paid in full if, in fact, we go past the X date?
My professional opinion is that it's leveraged politically.
It's leveraged politically. Did they provide you an answer at the time?
I don't remember what the answer was.
But what you did not hear from them was any legal reason or any mathematical reason or any financial reason why they couldn't and shouldn't, and under the 14th Amendment wouldn't already be required to, pay first those creditors whose payments have become due.
The explanation I've always heard, at least since, there used to be an argument back when I first got to Congress that it might not be legal, but I think we put that aside now. I heard Dr. Edelberg mention it, but I'm pretty sure there's a GAO report from the 80s that makes it clear it's okay to prioritize, at least it's legal. The argument I've heard ever since that is that they're simply not capable of doing it from a technological standpoint. Their systems don't allow it to do that, but they've taken no steps to change the systems.
Now, you referred a moment ago to when you first got to Congress. I believe you and I were both elected in the same year, back in 2010. We arrived here, were sworn into office in our respective chambers in 2011. We had a debt ceiling fight back in 2011. Remember that one?
I do.
Yeah. That one was memorable. One of the many things that was interesting about it, and somewhat memorable that's been brought up here today, is the downgrade, a downgrade that was issued. Do ratings agencies downgrade people for not borrowing enough?
No.
Did they then?
No.
Did they downgrade us specifically because we were not eager to raise the debt ceiling without significant conditions attached to it?
My understanding from reading the report is that the primary reason they downgraded us is because we had no plan to fix our fiscal condition going forward. Even though keep in mind, they downgraded us after we cut the deal. So we had raised the debt ceiling and still got the downgrade because they looked at the deal we cut and said, you know what, that's not even close.
So in other words, they weren't satisfied that we had an adequate plan moving forward to reduce overall debt.
And we still don't.
And yet to this day, for the last 12 years, it has become an almost accepted trope, an almost accepted narrative as if it were canonical scripture, that we got downgraded because we were not so eager to increase the debt ceiling that we were willing to increase the debt ceiling without a plan moving forward. In fact, it's quite the opposite of how it's often characterized, isn't it?
It is. In fact, I don't believe that any of the Democrat committees have ever asked the rating agencies to come in and talk about why they gave the downgrade.
Gee, I wonder why that is. Now, there are reasons, of course, why these things matter, because what is it that happens to us if we continue to punt it, if we continue to kick it forward, we continue to increase the debt ceiling, continue to increase the percentage of debt, the debt as a percentage of GDP, without addressing the underlying spending problem? What does that ultimately do, and what does that do to our actual risk of an actual default?
My fear is that the same thing happens to us on debt that has happened to us on modern monetary theory, which you don't hear much about anymore in the last couple of weeks or the last couple of months since we had inflation. Remember that theory that you could just spend as much money as you wanted to and it doesn't make any difference?
I do, and I'll be darned, it turned out not to be true.
It turned out not. It's true until it's not. And all of these theories about, oh, debt to GDP doesn't really make any difference, which Dr. Edelberg has mentioned here today, might be true until it's not. And then what do? Then you're already, we have no plan to get out of the debt. Listen, I have nothing but respect for Mrs. Porter. I served with her for Representative Porter, and she told a wonderful little analogy about her credit card, but I'll bet you there's a significant difference. I bet you she has a plan for how to pay off her credit card. We have none.
Indeed. We do, however, have a plan. We have a plan that was passed by the House of Representatives, a plan that would bring down our debt by $5 trillion over the 10-year budget window, with something in the neighborhood of around $1 trillion, depending on which accounting method you use, a little over or a little under $1 trillion in the first year alone. It would do so in a way that would help us approach this debt issue more responsibly. To date, it is the only plan on the table. It is the negotiation. People say, well, it still needs to be negotiated. Right now, it is the negotiation. Because for 100 days, President Biden refused even to speak to Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy about this, insisting all the time, all the while, that he would take nothing less than a clean debt ceiling increase. Yet another one of the same sorts of things that would predictably lead to a credit rating downgrade. I urge all involved, including and especially President Biden, move forward with this. There is only one plan on the table, and with as late as you've waited, you need to move forward. Let's pass the House-passed bill. Thank you.
Thank you, and I recognize